I never thought I'd live to see the day my own daughter would be ashamed of me. But when the wedding invitation skipped my mailbox, I realized love has limits in her world, and money was the borderline. I stood by the old mailbox at the end of my cracked driveway, flipping through the day's letters like I had every morning that week. Electricity bill, local grocery coupon, a charity flyer, no envelope with my daughter's name on it. At first, I told myself it must have been delayed. Maybe they sent it to the wrong address. Maybe it was stuck in someone else's pile. But as days turned into a week, and a week into two, I stopped pretending. There wasn't any mistake. My daughter, my little Emily, was getting married, and I wasn't invited. The thought sat heavy in my chest like a rusted wrench that wouldn't budge. I raised that girl alone after her mother passed. I worked double shifts fixing cars for people who couldn't afford the big dealerships. Emily used to sit in my workshop after school, swinging her little legs from a stool, helping me sort bolts by size. She'd tell me, "Daddy, one day I'll buy you a real garage with a big red sign that says Hank's Motors." I'd laugh, wipe the oil from my hands, and tell her, "Sweetheart, I don't need a big sign. You're my proudest work." But something changed after she went to college. The phone calls got shorter. Her visits home became rare. She started saying things like, "Dad, maybe you should wear something nicer," or "You really should think about moving out of that old house." I'd smile and tell her I liked things simple, but I could feel her growing embarrassed by me, by the grease on my hands, by my old truck, by the smell of engine oil that clung to my clothes. And then came the engagement. She called me one evening, her voice full of excitement. "Dad, Michael proposed. He's amazing, you'll love him. He's a lawyer, very successful." I remember my heart swelling with pride. "That's wonderful, Em. I can't wait to meet him." But when I did, Michael's handshake was cold. His eyes scanned my worn boots and faded jacket before meeting mine. I could feel the silent judgment, like I was an unwanted scratch on his polished world. After that, Emily stopped calling as much. When she did, it was all about the wedding, the venue, the dress, the guests. But never once did she say, "Dad, you'll walk me down the aisle." Then I saw the wedding announcement online. Glossy photos, smiling faces, and under family attending, her mother's relatives listed in neat print. My name wasn't there. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. My own daughter had cut me out like I was never part of her story. 2 days later, I got a call. It was Emily. "Dad," she said, her tone nervous, "please don't take this the wrong way, but the wedding is kind of small, and Michael's parents want it to be, formal. Everyone there is, well, from his circle. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. That word hit me harder than any insult. "Emily," I said slowly, "are you saying you don't want me there because I don't fit in?" There was silence. Then a weak, guilty laugh. "It's not that, Dad. It's just you wouldn't like it. The suits, the fancy stuff. It's not really your scene." I didn't yell, didn't argue. I just said, "All right, sweetheart. You have a beautiful day." And I hung up. That night, I went into my garage, the one place the world still made sense. The smell of gasoline, the hum of an old radio, the feel of metal and muscle beneath my fingertips. I sat beside the half-finished car I'd been restoring for years, a 1969 Mustang GT my brother had left me before he passed. He'd always dreamed of seeing it roar back to life. But life, bills, and time got in the way. The car stayed unfinished, covered with a tarp, waiting for me to find both courage and reason to complete it. That night, I found both. If my daughter thought I was beneath her because of the dirt under my nails, maybe it was time I reminded her what real worth looked like. Not with shouting, not with anger, but with something that would make her eyes widen and her pride crumble in silence. So I picked up my tools. I turned on the light, and as the first spark lit under the hood, I whispered, "You wanted a man who fits your world, Emily. I'll show you what your father can build." The nights that followed blurred together. I worked till dawn, the hum of the engine becoming my heartbeat. My hands ached, my back screamed, but the car, she began to live again. Piece by piece, memory by memory. I'd pause sometimes, staring at the photo of Emily as a little girl taped to my toolbox, the one where she's smiling with grease on her cheek. "You loved this world once," I'd whisper. By the time the sun rose on the morning of her wedding, the Mustang stood gleaming in my driveway. Black paint shining like liquid glass, chrome edges catching the light, engine purring like a lion's breath. I wiped the oil from my hands and looked at myself in the side mirror. The same old man stared back, gray hair, rough beard, wrinkles that time refused to hide. But there was something new in his eyes, peace. I didn't plan to make a scene. I didn't even plan to go inside. I just wanted her to see me, to remember that her father wasn't poor, just rich in the things she'd forgotten to value. So I put on my cleanest shirt, took a deep breath, and turned the key. The Mustang roared to life. As I pulled out of the driveway, neighbors turned their heads. Some even clapped. And somewhere deep down, I could almost hear my brother's voice saying, "That's my car, Hank. You did it." I smiled, the wind rushing through the open window, and whispered, "Now let's go show her what love built." The drive to the country club felt longer than usual. The road stretched through rolling hills and tall oaks, each mile whispering old memories I'd rather not remember. Emily's laughter in the back seat when she was a little girl, singing off-key to the radio. Her small hand clutching mine the day I dropped her off for college. Now, I was driving to a wedding I hadn't been invited to, my daughter's wedding. I told myself I wasn't going there to cause trouble. I wasn't going to make a scene or demand answers. I just wanted to see her, to know she was happy, even if I wasn't part of her new world. But deep down, a small part of me wanted her to see me, too. Not the old mechanic who never made much, but the father who built something beautiful with his own hands. The Mustang's engine rumbled like distant thunder as I pulled into the venue's gravel driveway. Heads turned immediately. Guests in tuxedos and glittering dresses stopped mid-conversation to stare. I could see the confusion in their eyes, the kind that flickers between admiration and judgment. The car, freshly polished, reflected the sunlight like a jewel. Its black body gleamed, its silver details sharp enough to draw envy. And behind the wheel sat a man in a clean button-down, a quiet storm in his eyes. The valet boy ran toward me, nearly tripping. "Sir, what a ride. Is that a '69 GT? "Sure is," I said, handing him the keys. "Be careful with her. She's got more heart than most folks here." He grinned. "Yes, sir." As I stepped out, a few men nearby whispered, glancing between the car and me. "Who's that guy? Some collector, maybe? Look at that car. Easily worth $100,000. I straightened my shoulders, suddenly aware of the oil stains that never quite washed off my skin. I could almost hear Emily's voice from years ago. "Dad, please, can you wear something normal for once?" I sighed. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did look out of place here. But I was here anyway. The air buzzed with laughter and champagne. Waiters moved like clockwork, carrying trays of golden glasses. String music drifted through the courtyard. Everything looked expensive, the kind of beauty that costs too much to feel real. I stood by the edge of the garden, half hidden by the tall hedges, watching as the ceremony began. Emily appeared, radiant in white, her arm looped through Michael's. She looked older somehow, polished, distant. For a moment, I forgot the hurt. She was still my little girl. The same smile, the same nervous hands. My chest tightened with pride and pain all at once. Then she saw me. Her eyes flicked to the driveway, where the Mustang still stood shining like a mirror. Her gaze followed the car, then found me. At first, confusion, then disbelief, then something I hadn't seen in years, shame. "Dad?" she whispered, her lips barely moving. Michael followed her stare, his brow furrowing. "Who's that?" Her voice trembled. "That's my father." The crowd turned. For a second, it felt like the world stopped breathing. I didn't move. I didn't wave or smile. I just stood there, letting the silence speak for me. Michael's mother, a tall woman with too much jewelry and too little kindness, leaned toward Emily. "You didn't tell us your father was coming." Emily's face flushed red. I didn't think he would. I should have left. Maybe that would have been easier. But something in me refused to back down. I'd been invisible long enough. So I took a slow step forward. Then another. The crowd parted as I walked, not out of respect, but out of uncertainty. When I reached Emily, I tipped my head slightly. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Her eyes glistened, her lips trembling. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I smiled softly. "Just came to see you walk down the aisle. I promise I won't stay long." The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. Michael's face tightened. "Sir, this is a private ceremony." "I'm aware," I said. "Don't worry, I'm not here to cause a scene. Just wanted to wish my daughter happiness." I turned to go, but before I did, one of Michael's groomsmen, Some smug guy in designer sunglasses muttered under his breath, loud enough for me to hear. Guess not all guests could afford a tux. The laughter that followed cut through me like a blade. Emily didn't say a word. She just looked down, as if wishing I'd disappear. That hurt more than any insult. I took a breath, steadying my voice. You know, I said, still calm, I might not own a fancy suit, but I built that car you're all staring at from scratch. Every inch of it. It took me 10 years. And it runs smoother than any of your words today. The man's smirk faded. The laughter died. Even Michael shifted uncomfortably. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Dad, please. I nodded. It's okay, honey. You don't owe me an apology. I just wanted you to know. Poor doesn't mean worthless. Then I turned to leave. But before I reached the gate, I heard a voice behind me. A deeper one. Sir, said an older man with silver hair and a firm handshake. That's your car, right? I paused. Yes, sir. Restored it myself. He smiled, impressed. I'm Robert Hayes. I collect classics. That's one of the cleanest Mustangs I've ever seen. You ever think of selling it? I chuckled. Never thought about it, but everything's got a price, I suppose. He reached into his jacket and handed me a card. If you ever change your mind, call me. That car's worth 6 figures easily, maybe more. Michael's face went pale. Emily looked between us, realization dawning in her eyes. The man everyone assumed was poor had just been offered more money than most of them made in a year. I took the card and nodded. Appreciate it, Mr. Hayes. But I think I'll hang on to her a little longer. Some things mean more than money. And with that, I walked away, leaving behind gasps, whispers, and my daughter's trembling silence. As I reached the car, I looked back one last time. Emily was standing there, bouquet shaking in her hands, watching her father drive away, not out of shame this time, but something else, something closer to regret. The engine roared as I pulled out of the lot. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt free. The drive home that night felt strangely quiet. The road was the same, the hum of the engine steady, but something in me had changed. For the first time in years, I wasn't driving toward disappointment. I was driving away from it. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered like it always did. The house looked small, weathered, but warm, the kind of place that smelled like coffee, sawdust, and memories. I parked the Mustang, turned off the ignition, and sat in silence for a moment. My hands rested on the steering wheel, trembling just a little. I'd done it. I'd seen her, seen the look in her eyes when she realized her old man wasn't the failure she'd painted in her mind. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the clock tick. The night was heavy with thoughts I didn't want to face. Somewhere in the distance, a train rumbled, the same sound that used to lull Emily to sleep when she was little. I used to tell her it was a dream train, carrying people to better tomorrows. Funny thing about tomorrows, they come whether you're ready or not. It must have been close to midnight when I heard the knock. Soft at first, then again, more urgent. I frowned, setting the cup down. Not many folks came by this late. When I opened the door, my heart nearly stopped. Emily stood there, her white dress wrinkled, mascara streaked down her cheeks, hair pinned unevenly. She looked lost, like the same frightened girl I used to carry home from nightmares. Dad, her voice cracked. Can I come in? I didn't answer right away. I just stepped aside and nodded toward the couch. She slipped off her heels, her feet bare and trembling against the old floorboards. The sight of her like that, fragile, stripped of all that pride, broke something inside me. She sat down, burying her face in her hands. I messed up, Dad. I really messed up. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, saying nothing. The silence did the talking for me. Finally, she looked up, eyes red. When you left, everything felt wrong. The ceremony went on, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. About how you looked standing there, about what I said. Her voice cracked again. I didn't invite you because I thought you'd embarrass me. I thought Michael's family would look down on me because of you. But then, when I saw that car, and the way people looked at you, with respect, I realized it was me who should have been ashamed. I took a deep breath. Emily, it was never about the car. I know, she whispered. It was about the man behind the wheel. The one who worked his whole life, so I could have a better one. And I threw that in his face. Her tears fell freely now. She looked smaller than ever, like the little girl who used to hug me after school and promise she'd make me proud. I sat across from her, my hands rough and steady. "Emily," I said softly, "I didn't raise you to value money over people. But somewhere along the line, the world taught you that what shines must be gold." She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "I let them change me, Dad. I thought being with someone successful would fix everything. But tonight, when Michael's friends laughed at you and he didn't say a word to stop them, I saw who he really was." She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I left after the dinner. I couldn't go through with the rest." The room went quiet again. The only sound was the old fridge humming in the corner. I wanted to tell her everything was fine, that we could forget it. But something in me hesitated. Forgiveness isn't something you hand out like spare change. It's earned piece by piece. After a long pause, I said, "You're still my daughter. That won't change. But, Emily, respect isn't something you get from a wedding or a paycheck. It's something you give. And you forgot that." Her lips trembled. "I know. I just want to make it right. I don't care about the house, the ring, any of it. I just want my dad back." I looked at her, really looked, past the tears, past the fancy dress, to the scared, sorry heart beneath it all. And in that moment, I realized something. I'd been so focused on proving my worth that I'd forgotten how much she needed to see love instead of pride. So I reached over, took her hand gently, and said, "You never lost me, kiddo. You just stopped looking." She broke into a sob and leaned forward, hugging me tight. Her tears soaked into my shoulder, her voice muffled against my shirt. "I'm so sorry, Dad. For everything." "I know, sweetheart," I whispered, my hand on her back. "We'll be all right. Just don't forget where you came from next time someone tries to tell you what you're worth." We sat there like that for a long time. The old clock kept ticking. The night softened. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel so empty. Eventually, she fell asleep on the couch, her head resting against my arm. I covered her with a blanket and looked at her, the woman she'd become and the child she still was. I could have sold that Mustang for a fortune. I could have taken that card, moved to a better place, lived comfortably. But as I watched my daughter sleeping, all that money seemed small. I whispered into the quiet, "You're still the best thing I ever built." The morning sun crept through the kitchen blinds, painting lines across the floorboards. The house smelled of coffee and engine oil, the same scent Emily grew up with. She stirred on the couch, her wedding dress wrinkled and heavy, eyes swollen from tears. For a second, she looked disoriented, like she couldn't remember where she was. Then her gaze found me, sitting by the window, sipping coffee from the same chipped mug I'd used since she was a child. "Morning," I said softly. She sat up slowly. "I can't believe I'm still wearing this thing," she muttered, tugging at the sleeve of her dress. I smiled faintly. "Well, it's not every day you run out on your own wedding." Her lips pressed together. "I didn't run away, Dad. I just realized I was walking into something wrong." She looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "Michael called last night. Dozens of times." I couldn't answer. I didn't know what to say. "You plan to talk to him?" She hesitated. "He'll probably come here." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, letting her gather her thoughts. She looked small again, her confidence stripped away by a truth too heavy for someone her age to carry. That love built on shame never lasts. Around noon, a car pulled into the driveway. The rumble wasn't like mine. Too smooth, too quiet. Emily looked out the window and froze. "It's him." Michael stepped out of a sleek black sedan, expensive enough to buy my whole block twice over. His tie was gone, jacket unbuttoned, expression twisted between anger and embarrassment. He didn't even knock, just opened the door and stormed in like he still owned something here. "There you are," he snapped. "Do you have any idea what you did last night? My parents are furious. You humiliated us." I stood, slow and calm, between him and my daughter. "Watch your tone in my house, son." He turned his glare to me. "You stay out of this. You've caused enough trouble already, showing up with that damn car like some kind of what?" I interrupted, my voice low. "A father." Michael clenched his jaw. "You had no right to come. Emily and I had everything planned perfectly. You made a spectacle out of it." I took a step closer, the floor creaking beneath my boots. "You think a man showing up to see his daughter get married is a spectacle? Son, I didn't come there to impress anyone. But if your friends and family can't tell the difference between pride and love, that's on them, not me." Emily stood, her voice shaking. "Michael, stop. Please." He turned to her, exasperated. "Emily, Don't you see what he's doing? He's trying to make you pity him. She shook her head, tears forming again. No, Michael. He's reminding me what real love looks like. Something you wouldn't understand. He scoffed. Oh, don't start that sentimental crap. You think your dad's a hero because he fixed up an old car? You think that means anything in the real world? I took another sip of coffee, staring him dead in the eyes. That old car you're talking about is worth more than your fancy sedan. And unlike you, it didn't come with a monthly payment. His face went red. You think you're clever, old man? No, I said. Just honest. Emily stepped between us. Michael, enough. I can't do this anymore. I can't marry someone who talks about my father like that, who looks down on him for working hard his whole life. Michael threw up his hands. You're making a mistake, Emily. You walk away from me, and you're throwing away everything. The house, the career connections, the life we planned. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling but firm. Maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I need to start over and figure out who I am, without money deciding it for me. He stared at her like she'd just slapped him. You'll regret this, he said coldly. Maybe, she replied. But at least I'll regret it for the right reasons. I watched the scene unfold quietly, letting her speak for herself. It wasn't my battle anymore, it was hers. And for the first time, I saw the woman she was meant to be, strong, brave, and unafraid of losing what didn't matter. Michael turned to leave, but not before glaring at me. You'll pay for this, he muttered. I chuckled. Son, I've been paying bills since before you were born. I think I'll manage. He slammed the door so hard it rattled the picture frames on the wall. The silence that followed was thick. Emily's hands trembled, her breath shaky. He's gone, she whispered. For good, I hope, I said, setting my mug down. She nodded slowly. Then her eyes drifted toward the Mustang outside the window. You really built that all by yourself? I smiled. Every piece. That car's seen more nights than I care to count. She walked outside, touching the hood with her fingertips. It's beautiful, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't see that before. It's all right, I said, joining her. Sometimes people don't see what's right in front of them until they've lost everything else. The wind rustled through the trees. For a long moment, we stood there, side by side, the car gleaming in the afternoon light, the ghosts of yesterday fading behind us. Do you ever think you'll forgive me? She asked quietly. I looked at her, eyes soft but firm. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Em. It's about understanding. And I think we're finally getting there. She smiled faintly. Can I stay here a few days? Just until I figure things out? Of course, I said. This house will always be your home, even when you forget the address. She laughed through her tears, and for the first time in years, it sounded real. As the sun began to set, I grabbed 2 chairs and set them by the garage. We sat in silence, watching the sky turn orange and gold, the Mustang parked proudly beside us. A reminder that love, like metal, can be bent and battered, but never broken if you take care of it. And as the day faded, I realized something simple but powerful. Maybe I didn't need to teach her a lesson. Maybe she'd already learned it. The next morning, the house felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. Emily was still asleep in her old room, the one with the faded posters of country singers and the little blue curtains she insisted on keeping even when she was 16. I stood in the doorway for a while, just watching her. Her face looked peaceful again, like the years of pretending had finally loosened their grip. I turned and went to the kitchen, poured myself some coffee, and stepped out to the porch. The air smelled like wet grass and gasoline. The Mustang glistened in the early light, proud and still, like it knew it had changed more than just an old man's reputation. As I sat there, the quiet broke with the ring of the phone. I almost didn't answer. But when I picked it up, a familiar voice came through, deep, confident, the kind that sounded used to making deals. Mr. Miller? This is Robert Hayes. We met at the wedding yesterday. About that Mustang. I leaned back in the chair. Ah, Mr. Hayes. I remember. That was quite a day. He chuckled. Indeed. Listen, I wasn't joking when I said I'm interested. I've done some digging. A '69 GT fastback restored to that condition? That's not just impressive, it's rare. If you're willing to sell, I'll start at $150,000. I nearly dropped the phone. That was more money than I'd ever seen at once. But something in me stayed calm. That's a generous offer, I said slowly. But she's got sentimental value. I understand, he replied. But I'll make it worth your while. I'd even go as high as 200, depending on inspection. $200,000. Enough to fix the roof, replace the truck, maybe even retire somewhere quiet by the lake. Enough to erase every financial worry I'd ever had. But as I looked at the Mustang gleaming in the sunlight, I couldn't help but think, it wasn't just a car. It was years of sweat, grief, and hope poured into steel. It was my brother's voice in every rev of the engine. It was Emily's childhood laughter echoing in the corners of that garage. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But no promises." "Fair enough. My card still stands," he said, and hung up. I sat there for a while, the silence pressing against my thoughts. For the first time in a long while, I had a choice. Not between right or wrong, but between peace and pride. A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. Who was that? Emily stood behind me, hair messy, wearing one of my old flannel shirts. "Just a man from the wedding," I said. "He wants to buy the Mustang." Her eyes widened. "You're not selling it, are you?" I smiled faintly. "Would you if you were me?" She thought for a moment. "It's worth a lot, Dad. You could finally rest. Take care of yourself. You've been working your whole life." I nodded. "Maybe. But some things you don't sell, no matter the price." She sat beside me, pulling her knees up on the chair. "You really love that car, huh?" I looked at her, then at the Mustang. "It's not the car I love, Em. It's what it stands for. It reminds me that even when life stripped everything away, I still had the strength to build something beautiful." She was quiet for a while, then said, "You built me too, you know. I just took longer to restore." That made me laugh, a real laugh, deep from the chest. "Yeah, well, you still got some paint left to finish." Her smile faded as she grew thoughtful. "I've been thinking, Dad. I want to go back to school. Not for law or business, for something that means something to me. Maybe teaching. Or design. Something I actually care about." "That's good," I said softly. "You should build a life that fits your heart, not someone else's wallet." We sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. For the first time, I felt like we understood each other without words. She wasn't the girl ashamed of her father anymore, and I wasn't the man trying to prove his worth. Later that day, she helped me clean the garage. Dust, old tools, and memories everywhere. She found the box where I kept her drawings, cars, houses, our family. She held them like relics, smiling through tears. "I forgot I used to draw these," she said. "You kept them all?" "Of course," I replied. "You were my artist before you were anything else." When evening came, the phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. "Mr. Miller, this is Susan Hayes, Robert's wife. I hope I'm not overstepping, but my husband hasn't stopped talking about your car. He says it's a masterpiece. If you're interested, we'd like to invite you to an auto exhibition next week. The kind of event where collectors and investors gather. Your work deserves to be seen." I was quiet for a long time. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I fit in those circles." She laughed kindly. "Maybe those circles need a man like you." After we hung up, Emily's eyes sparkled. "Dad, you have to go? This is your moment." I shook my head with a small smile. "My moment was last night, when you came home." She hugged me tight, whispering, "I'm still proud of you." And as the sun dipped low, I looked at the Mustang again, its reflection gleaming like a second chance. Maybe I'd go to that exhibition. Not to sell the car, not to prove anything, but to stand beside what I built and say, this is what love looks like when it takes the long road. I took a breath, feeling the quiet peace settle deep in my chest. Maybe that was the real revenge all along. Not wealth, not recognition, but dignity. The kind that never needed to shout, because it was written in every mile I'd driven. A week later, Emily and I pulled up to the downtown convention center, a massive glass building gleaming under the summer sun. Outside, a banner read American Legends Auto Exhibition. Rows of spotless vintage cars lined the parking lot, their owners standing proudly beside them in tailored suits and glossy shoes. And then there was me, an old mechanic in a clean denim jacket and boots that had seen more miles than most of these cars combined. Emily looked nervous, glancing at the people stepping out of luxury sedans. "Dad, are you sure you want to do this?" I smiled. "Sweetheart, I've walked into tougher rooms than this. Let's give that old Mustang a proper debut." We parked near the entrance, and almost immediately, the crowd turned. Cameras flashed. Conversations paused. Even among the polished chrome and pearl paint, the black '69 GT stood out, bold, timeless, impossible to ignore. Robert Hayes spotted me from across the lot, grinning ear to ear. He walked over, shaking my hand with genuine enthusiasm. "Mr. Miller, you made it. I'm glad you did. Your car's been the talk of the committee all week." "Appreciate that," I said. "Didn't expect so much fuss over something built in an old shed." He laughed. "That's exactly what makes it special." He led me and Emily inside, where other collectors nodded respectfully. Some recognized me from the wedding, their smiles awkward, eyes full of apology. I didn't hold it against them. Pride and pity looked the same on people who've never gotten their hands dirty. The announcer's voice echoed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of the most remarkable restorations of the year, a 1969 Mustang GT, built by Mr. Hank Miller of Maplewood." Applause rippled through the hall as we rolled the car onto the main floor. Lights reflected off the paint like water, drawing gasps from the crowd. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. Reporters circled, snapping photos, asking questions. "What inspired you to restore it? How long did it take?" I answered simply. It wasn't about time or money. It was about keeping a promise, to my brother and to myself. A man stepped forward, someone I didn't know. He looked like money wrapped in silk. "Mr. Miller, name your price. I'll pay anything you want for that car." The room hushed. Even Robert looked surprised. "Anything?" someone whispered. The man smiled confidently. $250,000. Cash. Gasps followed. A few heads turned toward me, expecting excitement, greed, something. But I just stood there, hands in my pockets, studying the reflection of the lights on the hood. Emily's hand tightened around mine. She whispered, "Dad." I looked at the man and said quietly, "Sir, that's a generous offer. More than fair. But I'm afraid the car's not for sale." He frowned. "Everyone has a price." I smiled. "Maybe, but not everything worth building can be bought." A murmur spread through the crowd, some confused, others moved. Robert grinned, almost proud. The man shrugged and walked away, muttering under his breath about sentimental fools. Then the announcer handed me the microphone. "Mr. Miller," he said, "would you care to say a few words? About your car, or what it means to you?" I hadn't planned a speech, but as I looked out at all those polished faces, at Emily standing beside me, I realized this wasn't really about cars at all. I cleared my throat. "Most of you see a machine here. Chrome, rubber, horsepower. But to me, this isn't just a car. It's a lifetime. Every dent I hammered out was a mistake I learned from. Every piece I replaced came with a memory. It's a story of not giving up when no one's watching. You see, people look at someone like me and think poor. But poor isn't about money. Poor is forgetting what matters. Poor is trading respect for convenience. I built this car because I needed to remind myself that what's real, what lasts, can't be bought at an auction." The room went completely still. Even the camera shutters stopped clicking. I turned toward Emily, who was crying softly now, pride and love shining through her tears. "I almost sold it once," I continued, "because I thought proving my worth meant showing people I had value in their world. But I realized something simple. The people who matter never needed proof." The applause started slow, hesitant, then grew into a wave that filled the hall. Not the kind of clapping people do out of politeness, the kind that carries gratitude, even awe. Robert patted my shoulder. "Well said, Hank. You gave us more than a car today." After the ceremony, Emily and I stepped outside into the cool evening air. She hugged me tight. "Dad, I've never been so proud of you." I chuckled softly. "You finally figured out your old man's not that poor, huh?" She smiled through tears. "You were never poor, Dad. I just couldn't see it before." We stood there watching the sunset reflect off the car's hood, gold and orange streaks dancing across the metal. I handed her the keys. Her eyes widened. "Dad, go on," I said. "Take it for a spin." She shook her head. "No way. This is yours." I smiled. "It's ours now. Something we built together, in our own ways." She hesitated, then took the keys, slipping into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, steady and strong. As she pulled out of the parking lot, I watched her go, the car gliding down the road, sunlight glinting off its surface like a promise kept. Robert walked up beside me. "You sure you don't regret not selling?" I shook my head. "No, sir. Some things are worth more when you keep them." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I think your daughter learned more from that speech than she ever did from her husband." I smiled. So did I. As the sound of the Mustang faded into the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not victory. Peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need applause or validation. The kind that comes only when a man realizes he doesn't have to prove his worth anymore. I turned toward the empty road and whispered, "Drive safe, sweetheart. You've finally found your road." It had been 3 months since the exhibition. The garage still smelled like oil and rain. The coffee pot still groaned every morning, and life, for once, had settled into something that felt like peace. But the biggest change wasn't in my house. It was in Emily. She'd moved into the small spare room upstairs for just a few weeks, but those weeks had turned into months. At first, she was quiet, cautious, almost afraid to take up space. But slowly, the walls she'd built started to come down. She began helping me in the garage, tying her hair back, wearing my old flannel shirt, and laughing when she got oil on her face. "Guess I'm becoming your apprentice," she'd say. I'd chuckle. "You've got a long way to go, kid. But you're catching on." It felt like time had rolled backward to when she was 10 years old and thought the world started and ended in this garage. One afternoon, as we worked under the hood of a neighbor's pickup, she asked, "Dad, do you ever think about Mom?" "Every day," I said, tightening a bolt. "Why?" She smiled softly. "Just wondering if she'd be proud of you." I looked up, meeting her eyes. "I think she'd be proud of us." Emily had started working again, not in law or corporate offices, but at a local community center teaching auto basics to teens. She'd seen a flyer about the program one morning, clipped it out, and said, "Maybe it's time I do something that actually matters." When she came home after her first week, she was glowing. "These kids, they remind me of me," she said. "Most of them come from rough backgrounds. They don't think they're good at anything. But when I show them how to change a tire or fix a leak, their eyes light up, like they finally found something they're good at." I grinned. "Sounds familiar." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide her smile. Okay, I get it. I'm your daughter." Then, one crisp Saturday morning, she came into the kitchen holding an envelope. "Dad," she said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably, "I've been saving up, and I want to show you something." We stepped outside. Parked next to my Mustang was an old, beat-up Chevy. The paint was chipped, one door handle was missing, and it looked like it had rolled through 3 decades of bad luck. I raised an eyebrow. "You bought that?" She laughed. "Not bought. Rescued. I'm going to restore it, like you did with the Mustang." I couldn't help but smile. "You sure you're ready for all that work?" "Dad," she said, smirking, "you forget who taught me." That night, I stayed up late in the garage, just listening to the soft clink of her tools. She was slow, patient, determined. Every time she wiped sweat from her forehead, I saw a reflection of myself from 40 years ago. And for the first time, I didn't feel old. I felt proud, because my life's work wasn't the car sitting behind me. It was the person standing in front of it. A few weeks later, the community center called. They wanted to host a small event to honor their volunteers, and Emily had been chosen to give a short talk. "You'll come, right?" she asked nervously. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. When the night came, the hall was packed with parents, students, and local sponsors. I sat in the back, wearing my cleanest jacket, trying not to draw attention. But when Emily stepped onto the small stage, I could barely hold back tears. She looked calm, confident, radiant. Not the lost young woman who once thought money defined worth, but someone who had learned what it truly meant to build something lasting. She started her speech with a smile. "A few months ago, I thought success was about fancy weddings, rich husbands, and cars you don't have to build yourself. I was wrong. Success is when you can look at your hands, even if they're covered in grease, and say, 'I did something good today.'" The crowd clapped softly, touched. She continued, "Everything I know about hard work and respect, I learned from my dad, a man who never had much money but somehow gave me everything that matters. I used to think he was poor, but now I know he was the richest man I'll ever meet." My eyes burned, and I tried to blink it away, but a tear slipped through anyway. The crowd turned, clapping toward me. Emily smiled from the stage, her voice breaking slightly. "Dad, this one's for you." After the ceremony, she came up to me, cheeks flushed with pride. "How'd I do?" I smiled, wiping my eyes. "You made me cry in public, so I'd say you did just fine." We walked home together under the soft streetlights, the night calm and sweet. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking about something. You said the Mustang isn't for sale, but what if we show it again? Together this time, a father-daughter project. Not for money, just for the story." I looked at her and laughed. "You've got my attention." She grinned. "I was thinking we could call it Built by Love." I stopped walking for a second, staring at her. This woman who'd once been ashamed of my oil-stained hands now wearing her own with pride. "That's a good name," I said softly. "A real good one." When we got home, she went straight to her project car, rolling up her sleeves, humming to herself. I stood at the doorway, watching her work, the rhythmic clang of tools, the smell of engine grease, the faint tune of the radio in the background. And I realized, life doesn't give you second chances. It gives you new roads. And for the first time, both of us were finally driving in the same direction. By the time autumn rolled in, the air around the garage smelled of rust and maple leaves instead of summer dust. The Chevy sat in the middle of the concrete floor, panels sanded smooth, primer dull gray under the hanging bulbs. Emily wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist, leaving a streak of grease that she didn't bother to clean. "Almost ready for paint," she said, grinning. I leaned on the doorway, arms folded. "You're treating that thing like a newborn." She laughed. "Hey, you taught me that if you love something enough, it'll run forever." For weeks, she'd worked on it after her shifts at the community center. Kids from her class started stopping by, first one or two, then half a dozen. They'd hand her wrenches, watch her sand a panel, ask questions. She answered every one, patient and proud. The garage that once echoed with loneliness now buzzed with voices and laughter. One Friday evening, she came to me holding a folded flyer. "Dad, the town's having a fall fair next weekend. They're doing a charity showcase, classic cars, local crafts, food stalls. I want to take the Chevy." I raised an eyebrow. "You think she's ready?" "She will be," she said. "But I'm not doing it to show off. I want to auction it off for the community center, to fund the program for next year's kids." I stared at her, speechless for a second. "You'd sell your first build?" She nodded slowly. "Because it's not about me. It's about what you taught me, that the things we build should make the world a little better." That was the moment I knew. She'd learned the lesson life had spent years trying to teach me. The day of the fair dawned cold and bright. The park buzzed with families and the smell of kettle corn. Emily's Chevy, now painted a deep sky blue with white stripes, gleamed under the sun. On its windshield, she'd taped a handwritten sign. "Built by Love. Restored by Emily Miller and Friends. Proceeds go to Maplewood Youth Auto Program." I stood behind the rope barrier, hands in my jacket pockets, pretending not to beam with pride. Folks came by, snapping photos, asking about the story behind the car. Emily told them honestly, about her mistakes, her father, and how a second-hand Chevy had helped her find herself again. A local reporter caught wind of it and started filming. "You're Hank Miller, right?" he asked, thrusting a mic toward me. "Your daughter says you inspired all this. What do you think of her now?" I chuckled. "She's faster at learning than I ever was. Guess I built her too well." The reporter laughed, and Emily rolled her eyes but smiled, cheeks pink. When the auction began, half the town gathered. Bidding started small, but then the numbers climbed. 5,000, 10,000. Then a voice from the back, Robert Hayes again, raised his hand. 20,000. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He turned to Emily and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Not because I need another car, because every story like this deserves to keep running." Emily's eyes glistened. "Thank you," she whispered. The gavel came down. "Sold." Applause erupted. She shook Robert's hand, and he handed her the check. She turned to me, tears threatening to spill. "Dad, that's a year's funding. Every kid gets tools. Every single one." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Looks like you found your engine." That evening, after the fair, we drove home in the Mustang. The sun dipped low behind the trees, orange light flickering through the windshield. Emily leaned her head back, smiling. "You know, when I was little, I used to think this car was magic." I grinned. "Maybe it is." "How so?" "Well," I said, shifting gears, "it turns broken things into something worth loving again." She laughed quietly, looking out the window. "Then I guess it fixed both of us." When we pulled into the driveway, the garage door creaked open, revealing a space that suddenly looked larger, brighter. On the workbench sat a small metal plate she'd had engraved earlier that week. She handed it to me. Built by love, Hank and Emily Miller. I ran my fingers over the letters, the cool metal warming in my palm. Where'd you get this? How'd the kids make it in the shop class, she said. Thought it belonged right there. She pointed to the wooden beam above the garage door. I climbed the step stool and screwed it in, the sound of the drill echoing like a heartbeat. When it was done, we stepped back together and looked at it. Our name, side by side, shining in the dim light. Emily slipped her arm around me. Think Mom would like it? I swallowed hard. Yeah, sweetheart. I think she'd love it. Outside, the wind carried the scent of autumn, faint smoke, dry leaves, and something else. Peace. The kind that only comes when you've finally driven far enough to see where you started from. I looked at Emily and smiled. You know, I said, I used to think revenge meant showing the world I was worth something. But it turns out the best kind of revenge is just living well enough that you don't need any. She nodded. Then I guess we're doing just fine. The garage lights flickered off. The Mustang rested beside an empty space waiting for the next project, a reminder that every ending leaves room for one more beginning. And as we stepped inside, I glanced back at the metal plate one more time, its letters catching the glow from the porch light. Built by love. It wasn't just a title. It was the truth. A month after the fair, Maplewood began to talk. At the diner, at the hardware store, even at the barber's, someone would eventually bring up the mechanic and his daughter. Folks who used to pass me by with polite nods now stopped to shake my hand. They'd say things like, heard what you two did for the kids, or that car of yours put this town back on the map. I never knew how to respond. I wasn't looking to be on any map. I just wanted to sleep at night knowing my daughter had found her way home. Then one morning the mayor called. His secretary's voice was all business. Mr. Miller, the council would like to honor you and your daughter at the community hall next Friday. We're calling it Founders of Heart Week, a celebration of people who make a difference. I nearly laughed. Ma'am, I'm just a mechanic. She smiled through the phone. Then you're exactly who we need. Friday came bright and windy. The town hall smelled of coffee, varnish, and pride. Rows of folding chairs faced a small stage decorated with paper banners the local kids had made. Emily stood beside me in her denim jacket, nerves flickering behind her smile. You ever get used to this attention, Dad? She whispered. I shook my head. If I do, knock me down a peg. The mayor took the microphone. We live in a world where wealth often overshadows worth, he began. But sometimes a man with oil on his hands can polish the soul of a whole town. He gestured toward us. Hank and Emily Miller reminded Maplewood that being rich isn't about what you own. It's about what you build and who you build it for. The applause rolled like thunder. I felt my ears burn. When the mayor handed me the microphone, I hesitated. Speeches were never my thing. But Emily squeezed my arm, and the words came. I spent most of my life thinking I was poor, I said. Didn't have much in the bank, no fancy house, no vacation photos. But I've learned that poor isn't about money. Poor is waking up with nothing you care about enough to fight for. I used to fix engines for people who couldn't afford new ones. Half the time they'd offer me pies or lawn mowing instead of cash. You know what? I never went hungry, because what I got back was gratitude, and that kind of payment doesn't lose value. My daughter once thought she needed more than that. Truth is, so did I. But when you've got someone who'll sit in a cold garage just to help you turn one more bolt, you're already the richest man alive. I looked over at Emily. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Money buys comfort, I said, but love builds legacy. The hall went still for a heartbeat, then erupted into applause again, louder this time. The mayor handed us a plaque for inspiring Maplewood to believe in honest work and quiet pride. After the ceremony, people crowded around us. Parents, teenagers, even a few of Emily's students. One of the boys from her class, a shy kid named Toby, held out a small wooden model of a car. We made this for you, Mr. Miller, he said. It doesn't run, but it's strong. I took it, touched beyond words. That's what matters, son. Strength before speed. Robert Hayes appeared too, shaking my hand with the same firm grip as before. You know, he said, I went home after that fair and told my wife I'd just met the wealthiest man in town. I smiled. You might want to check your accountant on that. He chuckled. Oh, I wasn't talking about money. That night, back at the garage, Emily and I hung the plaque on the wall beside the metal plate built by love. She stepped back, arms crossed, admiring the way the two gleamed together. Looks like you're famous now, she teased. Fame's just noise, I said. I pointed to the plate. This is music. She nodded, thoughtful. You think we'll ever build another one together? I grinned. Already started. She frowned playfully. You did. I opened the side door. There sat a small frame of a half-built motorcycle, rusty but promising. Something lighter, I said. Maybe we'll let the kids help this time. She laughed. Built by love and chaos. Best combination there is. We worked late into the night, the steady tap of tools echoing beneath the hum of crickets. Every turn of the wrench felt like punctuation to the story we'd been writing our whole lives. A story about mistakes, forgiveness, and the quiet kind of wealth no bank could hold. When we finally switched off the lights, the garage glowed faintly from the street lamp outside. The plaque and plate caught the light, reflecting twin sparks into the darkness. I locked the door, slipped an arm around Emily's shoulder, and said, Come on, rich girl. Let's get some pie. She laughed, leaning against me. Your treat. Always. And as we walked toward the diner, the cool night air carrying the faint scent of oil and autumn, I realized that everything I'd ever wanted was already right here, beside me, walking home. Winter came slow to Maplewood that year. The air turned crisp, the mornings silver with frost, and the garage smelled of coffee, iron, and wood smoke. Emily and I kept the heater humming while the kids from her class crowded around the half-built motorcycle. Some handed tools, others just watched, but all of them listened when she said, Every bolt tells a story, so don't rush it. I mostly stayed in the background now, guiding a hand here, tightening a nut there. Watching her teach was like hearing a song I used to sing and realizing someone else knew the words better. One afternoon, after the students left, she turned to me and said, Dad, they asked me to take over the auto program full-time. I'll have my own workshop, my own crew of kids. I wanted to tell you first. I smiled. Looks like you finally got your own garage, huh? She laughed, eyes shining. Yeah, only took 30 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went outside and stood in the quiet yard. The sky was dark velvet, stars sharp as screws. The Mustang sat under its tarp, the outline still perfect after all these years. I lifted the cover and ran my hand along the cold metal. It felt alive, waiting. The next morning I said, How about one last ride before the snow hits? Her grin said yes before her mouth did. We drove out to the ridge above Maplewood, the place where the road cuts between the pines, and you can see the whole town below. Tiny houses, thin curls of chimney smoke, the river like a ribbon of glass. The Mustang purred steady beneath us, engine warm, loyal. Emily rolled down the window. Smells like home, she said. It is home, I answered. Always was. For a while we didn't talk. Just listened to the engine, the wind, the faint music of the past. Then she said softly, You know, I used to wish Mom was here for all of this. I nodded. She is. You can't build love that strong and expect it to disappear. She looked at me, eyes wet but smiling. You really believe that? I built a car out of rust and memories. Of course I believe in impossible things. She laughed, the sound carrying through the trees. I'm going to steal that line for my students. Just give me credit in the footnotes. We reached the overlook and parked. The sunset spilled gold over the hills, setting the chrome aglow. Emily leaned on the hood beside me. Dad, I want to do something crazy next year, she said. Start a scholarship. For kids who want to learn trades. Name it after Mom. And you. I swallowed hard. That's not crazy. That's perfect. She hesitated. Think we can raise enough? I looked at her, the same way I once looked at an empty chassis and saw a car. We'll build it, piece by piece. We stayed until the first stars appeared, then headed back down the road, headlights cutting through the dusk. The town lights flickered below like 1,000 small promises. Halfway home, Emily reached over and turned down the radio. Dad, remember when I said you were the richest man I know? Yeah, I was wrong, she said, smiling sideways. We're the richest. I chuckled. Now that's a statement I can co-sign. When we pulled into the driveway, snow had started to fall, soft, slow flakes settling on the hood. I shut off the engine, and the silence that followed felt sacred. She looked at me. You think this is it? The last ride? I shook my head. No, sweetheart. There's always another road. You just have to know when to take the wheel. She leaned across the seat and hugged me, tight. Thank you, Dad, for everything. I hugged her back, feeling the steady beat of her heart against mine. "You're welcome, kiddo. You were always worth the journey." We sat there for a long while, watching the snow gather on the windshield, each flake catching the porch light before melting away. In that quiet, I thought about all the years between us, every fight, every silence, every mile that had led to this peace. Later that night, I went back to the garage one more time. The plaque above the door glimmered faintly, "Built by Love, Hank and Emily Miller." Beneath it hung the small wooden model Toby had made. I ran a hand across it, then switched off the light. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of oil, cold air, and something eternal. Maybe pride, maybe gratitude. I looked up at the stars and murmured, "We did good, didn't we?" And somewhere in the stillness, I could almost hear two answers: the echo of my wife's laughter and the soft purr of the Mustang cooling in the snow.